So I want to speak tonight just briefly about three principles for working with polarities in the context, as Mark mentioned, of thinking about the evolution and culture and the evolution of culture. So the first principle I want to talk about for working with polarities is understanding, first of all, what kind of polarity we're talking about. When it comes to working, let's say, with a really dysfunctional polarity like, I don't know, the liberal-conservative divide in America right now, or something like that. One of the questions you have to ask yourself is, what kind of polarity are we dealing with? What kind of dysfunction are we dealing with? And what I mean by that is there are positive, negative polarities. One of the things we've come to understand, there's positive, negative polarities like wealth and poverty. That's a positive, negative polarity. Well, we'd like people to be wealthier. We don't want people to be poor. It's pretty simple in that sense. But there's also positive, positive polarities. Liberal, conservative, competition, cooperation. These are positive, positive polarities. Each side has core truths that are critical and essential. And when we recognize a positive, positive polarity, it allows us to appreciate the enduring, authentic, genuine, legitimate core values on each side. We can have that kind of respect and appreciation for whatever side we happen to be on of that particular polarity, or whatever side we happen to lean to. We can appreciate the authentic, legitimate values of the other side. If we recognize that one side of the polarity is not going to vanquish the other side is not going to vanquish one side, nor should it. Second principle I want to talk about in terms of working with polarities is understanding that dysfunctional polarities, which a lot of people in here work with, are all part of systems of culture. And in that sense, culture is developing, changing, evolving. Sometimes we forget that culture and systems of culture, whether we're talking about 2 people or 10 people or 20 people or 200 million people, are all part of systems of culture that are changing, developing, evolving. So what does that mean when we're working with polarities? It means that sometimes, rather than just getting the position A over here and the position Z over here to try to figure out how to relate to each other, another way we can work with polarities is to try to figure out, what is position A developing into? What could it develop into? How might it develop? What should position Z develop into? How might it develop? What's the future of position Z? And what we might find is the future of position A and the future of position Z more naturally work with each other in interesting ways, in a way that just getting this static, sort of unchanging system that seems so reified and so stuck, and trying to get this to talk to this in this kind of linear horizontal line can be very, very difficult. And so if we can envision that future of those two positions, it can allow us to kind of break up that logjam and begin to work. So that's part of what it means to bring an evolutionary sensibility to working with polarities. And that brings me to my third point, the last point, which is consider the adjacent possible. This term I want to explain briefly, the adjacent possible. It's an evolutionary term that comes to us from biology, but it's been applied to culture now and to organizational development and other issues. It actually comes from a biologist named Stuart Kaufman. The adjacent possible is a way of thinking about the future. The adjacent possible means the possible spaces that let's say myself, that I might move into in the future. The spaces that are adjacent to this moment. The spaces that are adjacent to the now. The spaces in the future that we might move into that are adjacent. There are certain things that are not adjacent to this space now. My adjacent possible might include bench pressing, 200 pounds, 180 pounds. My adjacent possible does not include bench pressing 400 pounds. That is not part of my immediate, that is not adjacent to my now. That is not my immediate future. So, good mediators, good people who are working effectively with polarities, people who are working effectively in dealing with entrenched situations, have a very powerful understanding of what that immediate future is, that maybe individuals or groups themselves can't see. What's in their adjacent possible? How can they move forward? How can that position A move forward? How can that position Z or B or whatever we call the other move forward? What's in the adjacent possible? I like to think that I'm, in some sense, I've been an idealist much of my life, but I have to confess that I'm really a recovering idealist, I think, in some sense. I believe in change, but I believe in evolutionary change, not necessarily revolutionary change, as idealism can sometimes lead us to. I believe in change that is the next step forward in this process that we're all part of, in taking the next step into that adjacent possible. And I believe that really good change makers, effective facilitators, effective mediators, in a sense, whether they know it or not, they sort of live in that shadow future. They live in that adjacent possible. They can understand it intuitively. They can sense it, and they can help people move forward into it. And by doing that, they can break up dysfunctional polarities so we can have healthy polarities. We need and want healthy polarities in all of our systems of culture, but certainly in our political systems, we need them. And understanding the adjacent possible can help us to move forward. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.